Most PMP candidates skim past this task in their study plan. Documentation feels like the boring part of project management. Surely the exam will not spend much time on it. That assumption is the artifact trap. Project artifacts are not paperwork. They are decision-making tools, accountability records, and the evidence trail the exam expects every PM to maintain. In this video, I'll break down Task 12 from Domain 2, Manage Project Artifacts. 3 enablers, the artifacts that matter most, version control and configuration management, and a practice question. Let's get into it. Task 12 sits in Domain 2, 50% of the exam. 3 enablers. 1. Determine the requirements based on methodology to manage project artifacts. 2. Determine the version control methodology. 3. Maintain a repository for artifacts that is accessible and current. 3 enablers covering how artifacts are planned, controlled, and stored throughout the project. The trap is treating artifacts as static documents created once and forgotten, when PMI expects artifacts to be living tools, version controlled, and accessible throughout the project lifecycle. The artifact trap catches candidates who treat documentation as administrative overhead rather than as a functional project management tool. On the exam, every artifact exists to serve a purpose. The risk register supports risk decisions. The stakeholder register supports engagement decisions. The issue log supports resolution tracking. An artifact that exists but is not used to inform decisions has failed its purpose, even if it is technically complete. The trap appears when a scenario describes a decision being made without consulting the relevant artifact, or an artifact being created and then never updated. Both are wrong on the exam. Artifacts are tools in active use, not boxes to check. The first enabler is determine the requirements based on methodology to manage project artifacts. Different methodologies require different artifacts, and the exam tests whether you know which artifacts belong to which approach. In predictive projects, artifacts include the project charter, project management plan, and all subsidiary plans, the WBS and WBS dictionary, the risk register, the stakeholder register, the issue log, and the change log. In Agile projects, artifacts include the product backlog, sprint backlog, burn down charts, and the definition of done. These serve the same functional purposes as predictive artifacts, but in a lighter, more frequently updated format. On the exam, matching the right artifact to the right methodology is directly tested. A risk register in a pure Agile context, for example, may be replaced by risks tracked directly in the backlog. Let's connect 5 key artifacts to the specific question each one answers. The risk register answers, what could go wrong and what are we doing about it? The stakeholder register answers, who matters to this project and how engaged are they? The issue log answers, what has already gone wrong and is it resolved? Remember, issues are different from risks. They go in different artifacts. The change log answers, what changes have been requested and what happened to them? The RACI matrix answers, who does the work, who is accountable for it, who must be consulted, and who simply needs to be informed. On the exam, knowing which artifact to reference for a given scenario is frequently tested directly. The second enabler is determine the version control methodology. As artifacts are updated throughout the project, the PM must ensure changes are tracked and previous versions remain accessible. Version control matters because project artifacts evolve constantly. The risk register today is different from the risk register 3 months ago. Without version control, the team cannot answer basic questions. Which version is current? What changed and when? Who approved the change? Configuration management is the broader discipline that includes version control. It ensures that the product and project artifacts are consistent and that any change to a baselined item is documented, approved, and traceable. On the exam, scenarios describing confusion over which version of a document is correct or team members working from outdated information point to a version control failure. The PM's responsibility is to prevent this through clear methodology. The third enabler is maintain a repository for artifacts that is accessible and current. Artifacts that exist but cannot be found or are not up to date provide no value. Accessibility means the right stakeholders can find and use artifacts when they need them, not buried in an inbox or a single person's files. A shared, organized repository, whether a project management tool, a shared drive, or a wiki, ensures the team is working from the same source of truth. Currency means artifacts reflect the present state of the project, not a snapshot from weeks ago. An outdated risk register that does not reflect newly identified risks is worse than no risk register. It creates false confidence. On the exam, any scenario where decisions are made from outdated or inaccessible artifacts identifies a repository management failure. The exam consistently tests whether candidates use artifacts to make decisions or skip straight to action without consulting the relevant record. When a scenario describes a new risk, the correct first action often references the risk register, checking if it is already identified, then logging and assessing it formally. When a scenario describes a stakeholder conflict, the stakeholder register informs the engagement strategy. Artifacts provide evidence and traceability. They answer, "Why did we make this decision?" months after the decision was made. On the exam, the correct answer almost always references or updates the relevant artifact, rather than acting purely on memory or verbal agreement. Agile artifacts serve the same purposes as predictive artifacts, but are designed to be lighter and updated more frequently. The product backlog is the Agile equivalent of a combined scope and requirements document. It is never finished, constantly reprioritized, and visible to the whole team. The sprint backlog tracks the team's current commitment. Burn down and burn up charts replace formal status reports, visual, immediate, and updated daily. The definition of done functions as Agile acceptance criteria, a living artifact the team references for every story. On the exam, Agile artifact questions test whether you understand these artifacts are not less rigorous than predictive ones. They are simply optimized for frequent change and immediate visibility rather than formal, periodic updates. 3 traps on Task 12 questions. Trap 1. Treating artifacts as create once documents. Artifacts are living tools updated throughout the project. An answer that creates an artifact and never references it again is incomplete. Trap 2. Making decisions without consulting artifacts. When a scenario involves risk, stakeholders, or changes, the correct answer typically references the relevant register or log before acting, not just intuition. Trap 3. Ignoring version control. When multiple people update the same artifact, the exam expects a controlled process, not informal copies floating around without a clear current version. Let's recap Task 12. Manage project artifacts. Enabler 1. Determine requirements. Match artifacts to the methodology, predictive or agile. Enabler 2. Version control. Track changes, maintain configuration management, ensure everyone works from the current version. Enabler 3. Maintain the repository. Keep artifacts accessible and current for the people who need them. The artifact trap. Documentation is not paperwork. Every artifact answers a specific question and drives real decisions. Treat artifacts as living tools in active use, not boxes to check at the start of the project. Let's test your understanding. Question. A project manager discovers that 2 team members have been working from different versions of the project schedule for the past 2 weeks, leading to confusion about task deadlines. What should the project manager do to prevent this from happening again? Option A. Email the correct schedule to the team and ask them to delete old copies. Option B, implement a version control process that designates a single source of truth repository and clearly labels the current version of all key artifacts. Option C, hold a meeting to verbally clarify the current deadlines. Option D, assign one team member to manually verify schedule versions with each team member weekly. The correct answer is B. This scenario describes a version control failure, exactly what Enabler 2 addresses. The sustainable fix is implementing a version control process with a designated single source of truth, not a one-time correction. Why not A? Emailing the correct schedule fixes the immediate problem but does not prevent recurrence. Team members may still reference old copies, or new versions may again become unclear without a process. Why not C? A verbal clarification is not documented and will not prevent the same confusion next time a schedule update occurs. Why not D? Manual weekly verification is a workaround, not a sustainable system. It consumes ongoing effort that a proper version control repository eliminates. B is correct because it implements a repeatable process that solves the root cause. That is your complete guide to the artifact trap, and why documentation is one of the most underrated topics on the PMP exam. Subscribe for more PMP exam prep. Next up, the methodology trap. Domain 2, Task 13 explained. See you in the next video.